All right, thank you for joining us. Is everybody ready? I think you need to fasten your seatbelts again. We've had such an exciting symposium, and that continues to be the case. We're going to make it exciting up to the very last minute, if we possibly can, and I want to thank you all for coming. We have our time frame that we need to be aware of today, which is to 1:15. So we're going to ask that comments and questions be succinct and to the point, and I think we have a lot of material to cover, and we want to thank our distinguished panel members for being here with us today. And what we're going to do at the start is just to start on this end and go down and let everyone introduce themselves and turn off their cell phones. He's making an example. He's telling you how to do
Practical
it.
demonstration.
Thank you. And tell a little bit about their presentation, and of course the theme is the case for a secret space program, and today specifically we're going to be talking about the evidence from governmental and non-governmental sources on that. And first of all, we'll start with you, Andy.
I'm Andrew Basiago. I'm a trial lawyer admitted at the federal and state level in the state of Washington. I was a child participant in DARPA's Project Pegasus between 1968 and 72, which pioneered time-space exploration on behalf of the U.S. executive, defense, and intelligence communities. As a college student at UCLA in the early 1980s, 1980 to 84, I served in the CIA's Mars Jump Room program, which I'm going to be discussing after this presentation in the Grand Ballroom beginning at 1:15 p.m. During this panel, I'm going to be presenting what I think is persuasive evidence that we have a significant thread of whistleblowers that establish the historicity of the CIA's Mars Jump Room program as an important historical component of the secret space program, indeed an early phase of activity in the secret space program.
All right, thank you very much, Michael Salla.
So on Friday night, I did the presentation on the Navy Secret Space Program. Tomorrow I'm doing a workshop on Antarctica and the Secret Space Program down there, and basically tracing how the German breakaway group established their presence in Antarctica using the German companies that were the ones fulfilling the tenders for the different flying saucer prototypes. So tracing the involvement of companies like Focke-Wulf and the Siemens Corporation, Messerschmitt, and how these German companies worked with American companies both prior to the Second World War, during the Second World War, and after the Second World War in Antarctica, and how that evolved into what Corey describes as the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, which has its headquarters, or had its headquarters, in Antarctica. And I'll be also relating that to the discoveries of these ancient alien artifacts in Antarctica, and why the secret space program down there in Antarctica is really putting a lot of effort into researching and finding out how these artifacts might help them further develop their programs.
I'm Bill Tompkins, and I was a third-class seaman in the Navy back in 1942, and I got a job as staff to Admiral Rigobata. Come on here. Do you guys understand what happened? Actually, these Navy spies, one of them came back from Germany, and they went directly to the Secretary of the Navy, Forstall. He told the Secretary of the Navy that what was happening in Germany and had been happening for at least 3 years, was an unbelievable program where the Third Reich and the SS had hundreds of in-mountain underground factories that were all run by slaves. These were actually building 24 different kinds of Draco reptilian Navy spaceships. They didn't just give them a manual to show them how to make it. They gave them brand new, shiny UFO vehicles that were in the Navy space organizations of the Draco reptilians. They were training the German Navy personnel to operate these. The plan was to eliminate all of the people that Hitler wanted to eliminate, not just in Germany, but every planet, every country on the planet. Then they were to train the German personnel to operate all of these different kinds of space vehicles that the reptilians were operating and jointly go together with that Navy group and implement the same kind of a programs all over this galaxy. I'll let other people talk about it. Thank you for letting me be here.
Hello, I'm Corey Goode. The last couple of years I've been disseminating information on a program called Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia Television. A lot of my information very closely relates to Tompkins, and Dr. Salla and we've both been working on doing Freedom of Information Act requests to try to get more documentation and further information to corroborate what I've been sharing publicly.
I'm Richard Dolan. I've been researching this subject for a long time of UFOs and secret space program as well. I've been researching and lecturing on this for a number of years. In my view, there is overwhelming evidence that there is a clandestine secret component to what we are doing in space. I base this on available evidence that is, I would argue, persuasively presented and easily documented, and some speculation based on top of that that I think fits. And I'm very happy to acknowledge when I'm speculating. I've argued that there is what we can call a breakaway civilization that probably uses very advanced technology in some areas. I don't know how many areas. And in all likelihood that there's a program that takes us off this planet and goes beyond. How far beyond, I don't know. It's interesting, and I'm sure everyone in this room is aware that I might have a different perspective on this than my colleagues on the panel here. And it's not that I think that everyone else is wrong, and I'm right. I certainly am sure that I'm wrong about a lot of things. But what I would suggest is that we're only best moving forward when we deal with, as a community, with evidence that we can call verifiable, and that when we take it to the rest of the world, we can defend. So that's a concept we can call falsifiability, which means that it doesn't mean something's false. It means that you can test it to see whether it's true or false. And it's been my contention that some of the information presented at this conference is not falsifiable, and therefore really cannot qualify as actual evidence. It might be true, might not be true. But if I can't test it, if I can't have any opportunity ever to test it, then it really needs to be set aside, and we can put it in the gray box. That'd be my initial statement.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I think what we're going to do, we're going to need to set up for questions from the audience. We could start out while you're getting is there another microphone that you could put there where people, when they want to ask their questions?
Sure.
And I'm sure, how many of you have a question in mind? Uh-oh. I can see. Okay. Now, what we're going to try to do, and they've done a great job of keeping it pretty short and to the point. I can guarantee you every one of them could talk about the subject, at least at this point, forever, almost, and would love to, and we would love to hear it, but we're trying to move along and keep on schedule. First of all, let's start with just the basic question and let each of them answer it just simply before we move on to the audience, and that is basically, what is the evidence in your mind from government and non-governmental sources that a secret space program is real and has been ongoing? So if you could talk briefly to that, and then we'll go down the line.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion of evidence at this conference, and I just want to emphasize that there's really two forms of evidence we can talk about. We can talk about scientific evidence, which is verifiable, as Richard stated, just stated. That, in fact, is the essence of the scientific method. Then there's legal evidence, and I would point out as an attorney that legal evidence is not a matter of truth or falsity per se, at least in terms of how we examine it as a threshold question. The threshold test of admissibility for legal evidence is a determination usually made by the judge as to whether that evidence is potentially probative, meaning tending to prove the point asserted, or prejudicial, tending to prejudice the point asserted. The second dichotomy that we have to remember when we're evaluating the issue of evidence is whether we're talking testimonial evidence, which hangs on what people say happened, or documentary evidence, which is evidence that's been recorded in which some past historical participant, a CIA agent, an FBI special agent, has recorded something. Now, I want to emphasize, for the benefit of this audience, for this gathering, that for our purposes in the ufological and exopolitical communities, in my case in the time travel community, and as an experiencer, both of these forms of evidence are important. They're both valued. They both have particular strengths and weaknesses, and to some extent, they're dependent on each other. So, for example, if somebody makes an assertion that they participated in a program, I essentially acknowledge Richard's point voiced in his presentation yesterday. I basically agree with the notion that we cannot hang our belief on reality or what we bring to the larger culture on what the law calls mere assertions, on people saying, this happened to me. On the other hand, because these projects were undertaken in secrecy, there's going to be a residue of experiencers who were in bona fide projects. I'm often asked as an experiencer whether I believe that Corey was an actual experiencer, Randy Kramer. You know something? I don't know. What I do know is I have to practice a kind of an objectified open-mindedness and first listen to what the whistleblowers are saying. Why? Because we need to gather testimonial evidence as to what happened in these programs. Okay, so thank you. Now, when we combine that with the kind of yeoman work that Michael Salla does, or that Bill Tompkins has done regarding his career experiences, we'll have the positive synergy of people saying, this happened to me, and guess what? Here's my name on a briefing document from 1968 when I was dropped in DARPA's Project Pegasus. But let me emphasize something about this issue of evidence, another point. I once had a discussion with Jim Mars about this question. He said, you know, Andy, in that wonderful West Texas twang, we wish Jim the best, health-wise and everything today, you know, and recently. He said, we now have 80-plus Roswell crash witnesses. And you know something? I found in this field that if you believe the major premise that extraterrestrials came to this planet with all the advanced technology that would require and crashed in Roswell, New Mexico as a result of encountering radar, then you're going to believe those 80, or at least many of those 80 Roswell crash witnesses. But if you don't believe that major premise, that ETs visited us and crashed in July of 1947, you're going to question President Truman's signature on a briefing document, which is exactly what the MJ-12 investigation of Honorable Stanton T. Friedman led to. It's ultimately handwriting analysis of Truman's signature on the Majestic 12 documents. So I just want to emphasize that my bias as a lawyer and as an experiencer is testimonial. I've been talking about what happened to me. But I admit also the Honorable Richard Dolan's very valid point that, look, we can't just hang our beliefs based on statements, based on mere assertions. We also have to dig into the government records and also create sort of internal proofs within the assertions themselves that the people involved are giving veracious accounts of their experiences. So let me just say in closing, what I can say about the Mars Jump Room program is that I stand by the 7 whistleblowers who have thus far come forward and described going to Mars via jump room. And those individuals, in my opinion, are Michael C. Relf, Arthur Neumann, who was the Henry Deacon informant to Project Camelot, myself, my fellow jumper, William Brett Stillings, my dear friend Laura Eisenhower, who brought some very interesting testimonial evidence, which I'll describe in closing, and then Bernard Mendez and William Whitecrow, who was known as William Paris back when he was my martial arts instructor on Pegasus, and then I ran into him when he was serving as a U.S. Army Guard on Mars in the 1982-83 timeframe. Let me just close with 3 very conspicuous points about this testimonial evidence, and I'll use it as an example to show how testimonial evidence can lead to ineluctable conclusions just based on logic. Let me share one that involves Laura Eisenhower. When Laura came forward and stated that she was subjected to a recruitment campaign to go to Mars with her then 2 10-year-old twin boys, Gavin and Garrick Eisenhower, who are certainly astronaut material, she stated in an interview to Alfred Lambermont Weber that she was told she was going to be going to Mars via Ark. And in her discussion of that, she thought, well, they're analogizing to Noah's Ark, and they're calling these space planes that are going to take us to Mars ARKs, A-R-K. In fact, I know because of my training and my project experiences in the CIA's Mars Jump Room program, right, that the jump rooms, the technical term for the jump rooms was ARC, Aeronautical Repositioning Chamber. And just in closing, let me provide another lead that the testimonial evidence has led to, and that is William Whitecrow and I have provided not just very controversial evidence of taking a jump room to Mars many times, but the fact that in the 1982-83 time frame, at the building in El Segundo, California, where the West Coast jump room was, we encountered a very famous American who was supposed to be dead already, and that was Howard Hughes. And recently, we've been doing interviews with Major General Mark Music and Douglas Wellman regarding their book, Boxes, The Secret Life of Howard Hughes, in which, to my satisfaction, they prove that Howard Hughes' death was faked in April of 1976 so that he could work on sensitive technical projects connected to the CIA, like the Glomar Explorer and the Mars Jump Room program, without the risk of assassination or abduction. And so our testimonial evidence links with the testimonial and the documentary evidence they've gathered about Hughes surviving, not just into the 1980s, but indeed dying in the year 2001. So in the same way that a key FBI document or CIA memorandum or something can establish the historicity of claims like mine and Corey's and Randy Kramer's, the internal information itself can lead to proofs that when you apply the standard of evidence that the court of law or the court of public opinion is applying, essentially proves the veracity and the historicity of the claims, such as I believe Laura's statement does. She had the technical term for the jump rooms and didn't even know it. So anyway, those are my opening points, and I see the mic to
Yes, I wish
Dr.
we had.
Michael Salla.
Thank you very much. I wish we had all night, but we are going to have to speed it up if we're going to get some of our great questions from the audience. Thank you. It's all very valuable, but we'll certainly get more from your upcoming presentation. Thank you so much. Dr. Salla, you've made some remarkable claims about the relationships between aliens and the various factions of Germany. Can you clarify why the Germans lost the war when they had the secret weapon that Hitler boasted about?
What happened was that the Germans had been doing this pioneering research into anti-gravity, torsion field physics, and trying to, while trying to understand that, also try to weaponize that technology. And those are very separate scientific endeavors. And so that while one branch of the German military, and in particular the German Navy, because the Navy were always in control of the German space program, because the Navy were the ones that had the most experience in modular construction techniques. During the Weimar Republic, the German Navy was prohibited from building submarines, so they did an end play around that prohibition by basically working through German corporations, American corporations, Dutch companies, Spanish and other places to build the modular components of what would eventually be a new German submarine fleet. So the German Navy were the pioneers in this. They worked with German secret societies, the Thule Society in particular. The key German official running this Navy program was the Admiral Canaris. He was a Thule Society member, and so he basically pulled together German scientists, military people who could understand what would be needed for building this new German Navy, and along the way they learned about things like anti-gravity, new energy physics, torsion field physics, and so they were experimenting with all of this. And eventually, by the time Hitler came to power in 1933, he then began a program through the SS to weaponize these technologies. But all the time you had the German Navy working with German secret societies to build these technologies for outer space deployment, and at the same time you had the SS trying to weaponize these. And so as the war began and towards the war's end, while they had success in building some of these craft for spaceflight, so you have actually the Germans during the Second World War building and successfully sending anti-gravity craft from Antarctica into space. At the same time, the Nazi SS weaponization program in Germany was collapsing because of the bombardment.
Okay, very good. And if you could answer in 30 seconds.
Sure.
Just summarize in a nutshell how you see the evidence for governmental or non-governmental evidence for the secret space program, if it's real and is ongoing, just in a nutshell.
Sure. Well, I did this on Friday night when I presented on Bill Tompkins' testimony, where there was a lot of documentation supporting Bill's claims that the U.S. Navy out of Naval Air Station San Diego actually had a covert espionage program to learn about what the Nazis were doing, and that in the 1950s, through the documents that Bill has supplied from Douglas Aircraft Company and other companies that he worked with, and what we can get from public domain, there were a number of US corporations that were working with the US Navy in building these anti-gravity craft.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Tompkins. So many years have passed since your first exposure to UFOs, as is true with a lot of people. How confident are you that all of your evidence that you've brought forward is accurate and can be accurately regarded as evidence?
Could I talk a little bit about blue sky stuff?
Answer it however you'd like. I can't tell you how to answer, but just be quick.
Okay.
We're just on a little time frame, and these people out here will kill us all if they don't get their questions in at the end of the day.
Okay. Let me just talk a little, all right? In Douglas aircraft,
Let me just say, keep an eye on me. If I'm smiling, it's okay, and if I'm frowning, you might want to wrap it up.
smile. Okay, come on. Wait a minute, okay? I'm now an engineering section chief on the Apollo program, and actually we had the S4B contract, which is the engineering. It's the command center of all the Apollo missions. And actually NASA was involved. We had the paperclip people come in, but you guys don't understand. Douglas did all of this work 4, 5, 6, 7 years before NASA even existed. And so we have massive documents about going out into space, not just going to the moon. That was the first phase of an enormous program that Douglas had come up with the fellows in the secret think tank. So let me just say, how did my secretary get involved? Okay? I don't want to make it complicated. I don't want to try to sidestep it.
Could we?
Wait a minute.
Excuse me, just a moment. If we could focus on the secret space program, and we'll just have to book you for a whole weekend because you have stories that we want, that are great.
Okay.
But if we could just focus on how you view the evidence of the government's
All right.
and the non-governmental evidence
I'm
for the
trying to
secret
get
space
there.
program.
I'm
I appreciate
trying
that.
to get
I
there.
know.
Okay.
And you're precious.
Back to my secretary. Okay, no kidding. Wait a minute. We have in Douglas meetings every single day on the Apollo program. And when we're working together, trying to come up with an answer of a major problem on the Apollo program, my secretary puts it in my head and says, Bill, tell them certain information. This was always the correct information. Now, I cannot say that this didn't happen. This happened for 4 years with this young lady. So whether you believe that Nordics have been helping us or not, I have to say every question that's going to be asked in this room today actually comes down to information that's given directly to us. Now we have copies, hundreds of copies of documents which actually cover all of the Apollo program, the monies that were presented for these programs. This is hundreds of documents verifying that we went to the moon, that we were also supposed to go on 3 major other programs in space. You could say, okay, that's just some story that Bill Tompkins came up with. I'm sorry. It's all documented.
All right, thank you very much. That was excellent. Wasn't that excellent? Corey Goode, most people have trouble understanding, or maybe some people have trouble understanding the reality of time travel, time and age regression. Are there other kinds of evidence besides those like your own experiences that would support the reality of being able to travel in time? And then your quick view on the solidity of the evidence of governmental sources and non-governmental sources that a secret space program is real and ongoing.
Sure. Of course, I'm basing a lot of my information off of what I'm calling my own personal experiences. Experiencers have testimony, and even though a lot of testimony is admissible in a court of law, some people find that the scientific method works better for them. And I think that people like us that have information that we don't have a whole lot of corroboration or documentation behind, we need to understand also that there are different personality types out there, different ways of approaching problems, left brain, right brain individuals. And each of us are going to look for different types of information to validate either our experiences or what we think is reality. So I think that each of these different personality types and left and right brain type people need to realize that, and also realize that people that call themselves experiencers are heavily invested in getting to the truth, whatever that is as well.
All right, thank you so much, Corey. And Richard Dolan, you've written so eloquently about many aspects of the secrecy of the UFO program. Do you think there's still some secrets yet to be uncovered to get the whole truth? And is it possible, even possible, that some of your fellow panelists are close to getting some of the right answers, and then address your view of evidence of the secret space program?
All right, well, I'll answer that, but I really want to respond to everything that's been said up till now. I have to. So the main thing, I want to start with Germany during the Weimar Republic, which is what Michael was talking about earlier. It is absolutely true that during the 1920s, after World War I, when Germany lost that war, their military was disbanded. And it is also true that during that period, the German army and military did covertly work with other nations and outside sources to keep itself militarized. However, I would suggest that is way overstated. So they worked with the Russians during the early communist period, it's true. But even so, the German military was so weak during almost all of the 1930s. People have no idea. So when Hitler, for example, reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936, no one realized if France had budged, if France had done a thing, the German army would have been trounced in military combat with the French. They had no ability to withstand that. But it was Hitler's bluff that pulled it off, and it won the day. My point is simply the German military was not in much of a condition. So, with that said, you have to really ask yourself, how realistically was the German, how could a German space program have existed? Yes, we know about the Vril Society. We know about the Tula Society. Where was their money? Where was their technology? Where is this being siphoned out of the German economy, the German military budget? There's absolutely not one single shred of historical evidence that's come to us to show that the Germans were spending money on this. Their base in Antarctica, base, I use in quotes, Neue Schwabenland, yes, the Germans had an interest in Antarctica during the 1930s. We know this. But there is no, I repeat, no evidence that they established anything there other than dropping some swastika flags on the surface of Antarctica, which they did. Even the bird expedition of high jump, I challenge every single person here to answer me this. After the expedition supposedly ended in catastrophic military defeat at the hands of Nazi extraterrestrial combinations, why was it that less than 1 year later, in nearly the exact same region, the Americans sent yet another expedition there, which had no problem whatsoever? And then the year after that again. All right, so if the Americans were chased out of Antarctica, why did they return immediately with no problem? These are questions I haven't heard anyone answer. Relating to the claim of Dracos, I respectfully say that this is something that's not based on any evidence, any logic, and it is a purely sensationalist statement that I really have to question why it's being discussed at what I would say is a serious UFO conference, where what we're dealing with is, I have to say, nothing more than the collection of the most dark, tawdry, sensationalist stories that have circulated in our culture over the last century, which any outsider would say looks like a mishmash of everything that looked really cool and interesting and out there, and we've just gathered it together and put out there, and now stating as fact that cannot be confirmed in any way whatsoever, even tested in one way or another. So I challenge why that's being discussed here. And the last thing I would just say is, and I just want to respond to something Corey just said a moment ago, which is relating to truth and scientific truth and other kinds of truth. Truth is not a subjective thing, and truth doesn't care what your personality is. Truth is truth, and that's it. It's not whether you're right brain or left brain. Truth is what it is, and it's up to us to determine it and agree upon it. As to your question, Cheryl, I know I've talked a lot here, but you asked about evidence for a secret space program. Is that right?
Yes, that is real.
Well, yeah, I mean, very simple. I wrote my own notes down here. It's I think, very straightforward. You've got, first of all, it's out in the open that the United States military has classified elements out in space. I mean, the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, is highly secret. They've got spy satellites. We all know that there's literally a secret space program that exists. That is not even a matter of argument. You can go on CNN or ABC and argue that, and you'd have no problem defending it. The question really is, how advanced is this program? What are they doing? I argue, as everyone else here, that is quite advanced. There is a large amount of testimony from U.S. and Russian astronauts and cosmonauts, for example, for starters, of very anomalous objects that they've encountered in Earth orbit. All right, there's a lot of this, and we don't need to go over it all here. There's a great deal of good, in my opinion anyway, video evidence of anomalies in space as well. People can argue about them, fair enough, but I think there's enough that it's strong. There is good testimony from known NASA insiders and other individuals proven to be connected with the U.S. space program about nonstop rumors from the late 60s, early 70s about astronauts being followed by UFOs and encountering craft on the moon. This is not proven to be true, but it is a fact that those rumors were widespread in NASA. So I think I make some inferences based on that and other sources that make me think, yes, this is real. On top of that, you've got the entire history of testimony of UFO crash retrievals, testimony dealing with attempts to replicate the technology through the so-called ARV, Alien Reproduction Vehicle, which I credit that story. I think is a true story. So we've got the motivation, that is anomalies in space, to investigate. We've got the means to study, that is retrieval of exotic technology, UFOs. And there's enough good evidence that we've been working on replicating them. And then you've got stories from NASA talking about encountering bases and beings out in space. So to me, that's more than ample motivation for a highly secret space program. On top of that, you've got billions, maybe trillions of dollars of missing money through the financial black hole at the center of our global financial system. It's reasonable to ask, where's some of that money going? So all of it fits together. But to me, I would emphasize a lot of that is speculative. I would have a hard time saying that I'm proving this, but I think it's a good conclusion to make provisionally.
Okay, and speaking of evidence, and how do you marry the two, evidence verifiable with testimony?
Yeah, and Andy talked about this, and this is a very good point. So this is a hard subject for us to study. I mean, UFOs intrinsically are difficult. It's very difficult. On top of that, we have government obfuscation and interference that has happened, I think, interference. So we're really at a disadvantage in talking about this. And when I, as a researcher, and other people here have encountered individuals who come to you privately, they don't want to be publicly known. You get information, and it's not always possible to verify it. That's a fact. It happens to me as well as anyone else. And I have to go on my judgment when I'm listening to somebody. There's always a gray area there. I never know 100% for sure if someone's truthful or not. But I will say this. So Andy's point, I really take it, which is that you've got documented evidence that you can say, let's take this to the bank. I always keep that in a separate pile over here. And I like to know what I know. I know that this is true. Then there's all of this other stuff that might be true, might be false. Some of it I think is probably true, and some of it isn't. And so we have to. It's a judgment game. You know, the one thing I go by though is I don't allow anything in this pile over here. If it absolutely contradicts something that I know, then it's not going to really get much consideration from me. The other thing I just have to point out is that people do lie. People are delusional. It happens in my life. I'm sure in the lives of many people here, we encounter individuals who don't tell them the truth. And it's not that they're all liars. People don't tell the truth for all kinds of reasons. And I'm not the psychologist to figure it out, but that's the reality. So when someone tells you or me a story, I take it as a story and I make a little check note and I think, okay, maybe this is true, and I'll look for corroboration.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move very quickly, but I think Michael Salla has a point that he wants to make or possibly respond to, and he will do so very quickly.
Yes,
won't you, Michael?
I do want to respond to something Richard said, that the German military was kind of cash-starved and that there was no evidence of a secret space program that was being run during the Hitler era. And I want to point out that that's fundamentally incorrect. We know this. It's a fact. Albert Speer was the German war minister for armaments. He knew all about the German armaments program. And he was complaining that in the midst of him acquiring all of the necessary resources to basically be able to fund Hitler's war. And at the same time, Himmler's SS had set up a parallel military-industrial complex where he had no access to what the Nazi SS were building. And in his book, he wrote a number of books. In his book, it's not well known, it's called Infiltration, he lays out what the Nazi SS had planned subsequent to the war, where they would actually build a slave empire around the world using slave labor to basically continue these advanced projects. But Speer, I think in writing Infiltration, he was actually alluding to this Nazi SS space program out of Antarctica without directly saying it. But when you read the book Infiltration, it is pretty clear to me that he is actually affirming that there was this parallel military-industrial complex run by the Nazi SS that was predicated on slave labor, and that it continued.
Yeah, all of that is true. Speer did write this. I'm aware of this as well, Michael. It's totally true. Whether he's implying about a secret space program, I think is highly tendentious, and I would, again, ask for any evidence that the Germans, the Nazis, were developing anything other than plans. The Germans were interested in very non-conventional physics. No question about it. The real question we have to ask is how far did they go with it? And, we've got stories of de Glock, de Bell, and other types of breakthroughs that were allegedly made, but even the Bell story is nothing other than some testimony in a trial a few years after the war. We don't really know. We don't know how operationally. The Schauberger disk, another question. How operational was it? So I would question that.
All right, very, very quickly.
I would like to, I'd like to get into freedom of information. Dr. Michael Salla has an unbelievable program where virtually everything that I have said to him, he doesn't believe. So he has gone to freedom of information. These documents that he has, and he has many more of them, that confirm exactly what it was that took place. And I don't think that you folks give Michael Salla the credit for this penetration, because this is staggering. He finds out what really happened, and it turns out some of my stuff was correct.
Well, I think I think that's why Jan has designed this conference in the format that he's designed it in, so that everybody with a diverse opinion can come to the table and in an open environment very freely express their views and present their viewpoints. And it's kind of like we're in a big blender here. We'll put it all in there, we'll blend it up, and we'll see what comes out. And who knows, very few people on the planet can actually say they know everything to be accurate and honest across the board. But the only way we're going to get to the truth is to discuss it and take the good, the bad, and the ugly, and let it be debated and understood and questioned. And we appreciate all of your information and coming forward to help us do that. So with that, why don't we go ahead and start with some questions. We would want you to come up. You might just go ahead and form a line here, and then we'll get on with the show. And I think we're going to have some great questions, and we're going to have some fabulous answers. And again, in the interest of time, we are looking at right now just about 25 more minutes, so let's be to the point. Joe.
Thanks. You might remember me as the moderator of the citizens hearing. I'm currently running for Congress in Utah in the special election, calling for whistleblower protection and then congressional hearings, as I did back in 2008 as well when I ran then. Richard, this question is for you. You were at the citizens hearing. I thought one of the most interesting statements there was made by Mike Gravel, who dismissively, as most of his comments were, said that there was an active secret space program, U.S. space program, that he'd been briefed on apparently as a senator, and that would have been in 1972, so 45 years earlier. When do you think that part of a secret space program may have began, and what do you think members of Congress are actually briefed on that he might have known that early, if you have any documentary evidence of that. And then since I've got the mic, it's www.goodel, which stands for Liberty, .vote if you'd like to check out my campaign. I have to take advantage.
Thanks for clarifying what that meant.
Thank you, Dr. Joe Buckman. Vote for Joe.
There's no screening here, by the way. Just like in television, that 7-second delay, we don't have that. So
I'm going to. I'm going to try to be efficient with this, and I'm sure other people here would love to have had that question asked of them. But I'll do my best. I think that the likely secret space program developed probably right along with the beginning of the NASA program, or as some might say even earlier. I don't know. I'm only speculating. Look, as I said earlier, the U.S. military clearly has secret elements of their presence in space. I mean, that's totally beyond NASA. And this is, the U.S. military can and will never cede its domination of space. Can't do it, won't do it. It's too important. Space is the military center of gravity. It's if you don't dominate space, you don't dominate the ground. So they have to have it. I think it came right out of the beginning. And what congressmen are briefed on, well, I mean, my goodness. Stories have come to me from what I think are credible sources, people being briefed. A couple of years ago, I got from about a man who had been in one of the Reagan administrations, first 2 years of the Reagan administration. He was an assistant secretary of one of the departments who was briefed for 2 weeks in an underground facility shortly after he took office. I don't know exactly what he was told, but it was 2 weeks, and he was briefed about the extraterrestrial presence here on planet Earth. So as far as what the secret space program would entail, look, I'm sure they're briefed on some very advanced things, and specifically, I don't know. I don't want to speculate because I don't know for sure, but I'm sure that there's such a program that exists, and it is knowledge. There is knowledge that there is an extraterrestrial presence that is here. They're not out there. They're down here in the atmosphere and on the ground.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard.
There was a timing issue asked. Could I follow up on that?
Yes.
Historically speaking, I've considered this a lot because I had 2 different periods of service in the secret space program. Time traveling as a child in the late 60s and early 70s, and then going to Mars as a college student in the first half of the 1980s. I think it's clear that we entered the era of space travel around 1960. Of course, there was the Shepard flight and Glenn's flight, and in 61, 62 into space and then around the Earth. And then from my knowledge, I can state that we had landed American astronauts on Mars in 1964. The documentary source that I can cite, I can't proffer it, but hopefully someday it'll be found through the work of, let's say, Michael Salla or another leading researcher, was a French external intelligence organization dossier that I was asked to read in the summer of 1980 that was also read by a future president, Barack Obama, and the first woman to direct DARPA, Regina Dugan. So there was a reference, an anecdote, to a crash landing by an American team of astronauts on Mars where they perished as a result of not being rescued by the Martian humanoids in 1964. Clearly, we then crossed the threshold of time travel in 1970 because that threshold, I can say that, again, it's testimonial evidence, not documentary evidence, but it's my eyewitness testimony that we began time traveling by being set back in time upon arrival while Tesla teleporting across the country between New Jersey and New Mexico, in my case, in 1970. That's not just a benchmark or a goalpost. It was the year 1970. So we crossed the threshold of time travel in 70, and we know from the testimony of individuals like Michael Relf as to when the jumping to Mars began that it occurs around 1975, 76, and we have the faking of Hugh's death in 74. And so I would put the crossing of the advanced time travel / space threshold at around 1975 to 80. Those would be my
right, very good. Thank you. Next question.
If I could go to New Jersey or New Mexico, I'd choose New Mexico. My question, for anyone who wants to respond, I've got a question for Corey, and then a question about ancient space travel. Corey, you mentioned that your experiences started when you were very, very young, and that you were actually taken to a facility for some of your education. It's a simple, how was this presented to your parents and to the school and to the whole world that you lived in?
My parents just believed it was a different curriculum I was being brought into that included trips off campus fairly often. So there was nothing sinister for them to consider.
Okay.
It was not something that was on their mind.
So it didn't seem controversial or
No.
weird. The other thing, several of you have military experience. Are we still requiring inside people to sign their lives away, or are people put in jail for coming forward?
I think we were actually had a quasi-military status. I've been told over the years that I'm a Navy officer. The closest I've gotten to proving that is that I had a picture taken of myself several months after I first jumped to Mars in October of 1981. I was attending UCLA, and I was sent down to the quartermaster's office at the Long Beach, California Naval Station, and a photograph was taken of me in a naval uniform. I've also received bulletins from different veterans organizations, even though I never conventionally served. So I think from my point of view, what's relevant about the military angle is we were in a quasi-military status so that the intelligence community, particularly naval intelligence, could govern our activities, and they could keep a personnel file on us as Navy officers. But I think it's important to say that even those of us, I think, for example, I think Corey might agree with this, even those of us who were receiving forms of military training and interacting, for example, with Army guards or naval intelligence officers fairly frequently, were never mainstream military officials.
Which gives some deniability.
Well, that's what they were doing. I mean,
Right.
they were tracking us through the Office of Naval Intelligence, and I was even told that I was promoted to lieutenant commander when I earned my Juris Doctor degree, but I have no way of proving that. We were told that we had earned the Space Medal of Honor after we finished our activities jumping to Mars. I don't have a certificate, a medal, a letter from the Navy Secretary, so it really was sort of a no man's land of plausible deniability that they had
Okay.
architected.
And my question related to ancient civilizations. We're here at a conference about the sort of relatively recent UFO phenomena. Do any of you believe that it does go back to ancient times, like the pyramids?
Absolutely, and
Okay.
I think we would all agree that we've been visited by extraterrestrials for eons. One or more may have even been directly involved in our evolution or even our existence as a species. Certainly, on Pegasus, I was educated in the fact that that after the solar system catastrophe around 9500 BC, the small grays, at least one of the small gray species, was critically involved in kickstarting our civilization in ancient Sumer around 5,000 years ago. So I think there's more than you describe. I think there's a direct causal link between ET visitation and involvement in our history, our biological evolution, our planetary evolution.
All right, thank you. Next question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, this is mostly directed at Corey. I'd like to there's kind of a couple of parts to it, and I'll get through it real quick. Some of it is my own personal experience that for me were like gigantic aha things watching Cosmic Disclosure and saying, that's what that was. So one of the things was that I have all these fragmented memories as a kid of, and I don't want to go into the details because I don't want to take the time, but basically it was the MELAB program. I was probably washed out. I only maybe remember going out on the bus maybe 2 or 3 times. I do remember feeling like what was going on was like really inappropriate. I also have a memory of being like in a chair and getting injections and stuff. So I think that was probably blank slated at that time. So that was one thing. Now I had another experience in my 20s, and I using a combination of the stuff from Robert Monroe, and I was also a member of AMWORK. anybody that might know what that is, but you get to the 7th degree and they teach astral projection. So I developed this ability, and at one point, I had an experience where my psychic body was basically abducted. And there was a complete loss of proprioception. So there was an experience of being a consciousness, but it was like a 360 spherical kind of consciousness instead of, normally we have our consciousness coming out of our face.
Do you have a real quick question? We are really
The question
kicked
is,
out of here.
the question is, have you ever heard of this kind of technology? And I also have a colleague that told me that he came across this information about like soul shredding technology where they can abduct your soul and shred it and use it as a commodity. So have you ever heard of anything like this?
I mean, there has definitely been a lot of research in these programs into the soul and transferring the soul, verifying the existence of a soul. So what the interesting part is that the Nazis, they originally began to, I guess, marry some of these esoteric kind of principles, I guess we would call, with science. And they started developing what were some very interesting scientific theories and ideas about how to create technology. So I don't know if that.
Well, I mean, if you haven't heard specifically of it, that's fine. The other experience that I did have is I put up a website with a lot of information that connects the information of Itzhak Bentov with the law of one, and the correlations are amazing that come out of that, and you can develop a whole cosmology out of it. So I put up a website on this. And shortly thereafter, I started having like this heat kind of experience on the top of my head. And there's no question here. I just want to say this to kind of validate some of Corey's stuff. The psychotronic stuff is real. The psychotronic stuff is real.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Gould, Reno Skywatch on Facebook. In your opinion, this is for whoever wants to field this question, is there an ET component to the ongoing terraforming of our planet's atmosphere by geoengineering, that is chemtrails, and the activities that we see in our sky every day? Thank you.
I don't believe so, and that in fact was the only component of Bill's presentation yesterday that I disagreed with. I think it's clear that if we go back to the 1997-98 time frame, we have the memorandum from that seminar at which Dr. Edward Teller suggested that we needed to start spraying oxides of aluminum and barium into the troposphere to stem global warming to prevent ultimately the onset of a new ice age, as articulated by Art Bell and Whitley Strieber in their very highly creative work, The Coming Global Superstorm, which presents Dr. Andrew Marshall's threat assessment for the Office of Net Assessment, which is basically catastrophic global warming followed by a very destructive new ice age. And that's my explanation for the chemtrail spraying program.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
Yeah, I'll be succinct.
Thank
I
you.
see here a spectrum of knowledge from incredible direct experience through to practical research tempered with good skepticism. So MUFON's mission is the scientific study of UFOs. The question is, what responsibility, if any, do each of you personally feel to that mission, and to navigate a path of balance between the sensational and the credible? Specifically, what responsibility do you each have to provide actionable data for others to interrogate?
If I could quickly interject, we're trying to keep the focus on our on the secret space program, and if you could adjust your questions that way, we are so limited. If we go on to off the planet here, we are going to never.
I can quickly jump in and answer. I'll just make it very quick. So I feel a very strong obligation to present my evidence in as scientific and historically defensible way as I possibly can. That includes evidence for a secret space program, recognizing that this is a difficult subject to delve into. So it's using a combination of caution and courage. So you have to do both. You have to be careful with the facts, but you have to be brave with the facts. And if the evidence leads you into a certain direction that puts you at odds with society, you still are obligated to go there. But you have to adhere to what the data tells you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I
Next
was
question.
actually going to add one of the reasons why I never really embraced the UFO movement was because from the beginning I never saw this as a scientific problem. For me, it was always a national security issue. It was always deeply political, and so that's why I was one of the people that actually pioneered the term exopolitics and have continued to work with the exopolitics movement, because fundamentally I believe the UFO phenomenon is not a scientific issue involving the acquisition of evidence and quantitative analysis of that evidence, but is actually a deeply political phenomenon requiring us to really investigate the underlying political processes that it basically contextualizes this whole UFO phenomenon.
Well, it's really
And
those
good
two
point.
and much more. But yes, I agree
Yeah.
with you. It's political, it's scientific, and it is much more.
And as an historian, and of course Richard has written a book on the national security, so we have some very distinguished and very well-researched panelists here. Next question, please. Thank you.
Okay, I am an experiencer and a contactee, and I also come from a military family. Because I have a very highly developed right brain, I've been on many journeys. I understand the space program. And my question to you, which I feel I do understand, is it's been mentioned that there are slave races, and they take humans and children. I would like to know your opinion and where you get the information on where they get these humans and children from.
Okay, let me quickly
Can I grab that?
advise everyone of time. We're down to about, at most 15 minutes, including question, answers, and to the end of the line. So if you could help us out.
Well, I would cite the fact that Robert David Steele, formerly of CIA, recently reported on the Alex Jones show that there may be a situation involving abduction of human children on Earth with subsequent enslavement on Mars. I certainly never saw anything like that on Mars, the 40 or so times that I went 30 years ago, 35 years ago. But I did write an email to Bob Steele informing him of the fact that in my paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, which was published almost 10 years ago, 2008, I showed that in a ravine west of the home plate plateau in the Gusev crater of Mars, there was a morass of several hundred humanoid bodies, both male and female, clothed in uniformly blue clothing, suggestive of regimentation. So again, that's why I would urge objectified open-mindedness. I mean, it's a crazy concept to believe that there's not just Earthlings who have been kidnapped here, abducted here on Mars, but that they might be children who have been enslaved there. But I did alert Robert Steele of the fact that this was reported, this ravine full of bodies that could have been an open-air cemetery, a place of ritual human sacrifice, or some genocidal killing field, has been in the public domain now for 10 years and has been largely ignored, I think because we are too easy to indulge the giggle factor when those types of facts surface.
Well, and certainly some claims, some people would probably have to be psychologically prepared to seriously consider, because not everyone is equipped to just even consider some of the things. Can we just quickly move on, because we will not get our questions if we don't.
Yeah, I was wondering if the panel could comment on President Trump's appointment of a new space department just within the last few weeks, and I think under the auspices of the Air Force. And a related question is the competition between the Air Force and the Navy in space healthy, or what's going on with that?
Okay, let's start
Thank you.
down at the end and just come down very quickly with Richard. And
A lot of assumptions in these questions. So relating to Trump's appointment, other people may say that they know. I don't really know if anyone knows the details, because we're not in the administration. It does seem to me reasonable to assume that there's going to be an attempt to bring out in the open, or there could be an attempt to bring out in the open some of the clandestine breakthroughs that have been made over the last number of years or decades, and through the auspices of a new program. I'm only speculating. I really don't know for sure. I would also just say it's logical to do it, because we're moving into an era where the rest of the world is moving into space. It's not simply a domain of national nations, but private enterprises increasingly are going to go out there. And I think the U.S. government realizes, just as they broke the Air Force off from the Army back in 1947, that space has warranted the same sort of focus. Navy and Air Force have always had competition. Heck, back in the 1940s, the U.S. Navy had this so-called revolt of the admirals. It's a part of history. You can look it up. It was a big part of the rivalry back then that the Navy had with the Air Force. I don't think it's ever gone away. If they do have competing space programs today, well, I don't know that they have competing space programs, but if they do, then they each probably think that theirs is the best. I don't know.
All right.
But I suspect that there's not competing space programs. I suspect that it is, if there is a secret space program, Air Force and Navy, I would think that they are not separate and competing. That would be my position. Other people may have their own.
Okay, very quickly, 30 seconds or less.
I think that there is a competing program. I think that the Navy has space battle groups, these kind of aircraft carrier type battle groups, but deployed in deep space. And some good evidence for that is what Gary McKinnon says he hacked into in the NASA and the Pentagon computer system, where he describes fleet-to-fleet transfers and lists of non-terrestrial officers. I think that better describes how you have up to 8 Navy space battle groups, how they're transferring personnel between these different fleets, as opposed to what the Air Force has in terms of space surveillance systems comprising 2 or more space stations.
Well, they may be complementary rather than competing, for all we know.
Okay.
I don't know of any departmental rivalry, but I would just like to emphasize, just for the good of the record, that NASA is not our only space agency. So I would kind of displace that question into the domain of government agencies rather than military departments. I think a major import of my testimony is that indeed the CIA is one of our space agencies.
Very quickly, do Bill or Corey, are you passed? Okay, very good, thank you. Next question.
First of all, thank you guys for having the courage to do this. It's fantastic. It's awesome.
Courage, yes.
I don't know.
It takes a lot of courage to step out of the box.
It does. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to rent a billboard in downtown Chicago that says there's anti-gravity, there's 0 point, they're hiding it from you. That's how frustrated I am with this. But my question is, regarding evidence for a secret space program, right out in the lobby we have somebody who gives tours with the night vision goggles and claims to be successful almost every single night. I'd like to know what you guys think about that, because I've seen some of the videos on YouTube, and to me, that's a real eye-opener. I mean, it's fantastic.
Totally agree. I think a lot of it's very compelling. Absolutely. I've had several nights with night vision and looked at lots of video, and anyone who gets access to it, you look up above you. It can sometimes look like Grand Central Station above your head. And the question is, what are those things? And some are maybe a little more ordinary than others, but there's a lot that goes on up our heads when we have the technology to see it. And I do think that that is some evidence for clandestine activities up there, for sure.
Thank you so much. Excellent.
This is for Bill Tompkins, your secretary. I have a question. Did you and your secretary ever touch each other?
Now, what does that? What does that have to do with the secret space program?
Yeah,
I know.
I mean, I want
right.
to know if. I mean, she was an alien, right? An ET. So did you ever like shake hands? Shake hands?
I have to say, I believe my wife is right over here.
Yeah, we're not going to put anybody on the spot.
No, but I mean, the
But
skin. Did you ever touch her?
Actually, no, we never had sex, okay?
No, I'm serious. Did you shake hands or anything like that? Did you ever shake hands with her?
I believe she's talking about a different sort of communication with the touch
Yes,
of the
get your
hand.
minds out of the gutter. Just,
Right.
you know.
No,
Was
sometimes...
the skin different?
Wait a minute. Sometimes, truthfully, in a meeting, okay, where everybody is upset, we can't come to a conclusion, she would put her, if she was in the meeting there too, she would put her arm on the side of my back and whisper to me, tell him about so-and-so.
Okay.
Truthfully, I mean, she was a beautiful person, but tremendously brilliant.
Okay, thank you. And Corey Goode, could you talk about the 20 years a little bit more?
Okay. We just have a minute to talk about 20 years.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, that's just mind-boggling. Could you say a little bit more?
Yes, it is mind-boggling. Out of all of my testimony, probably the 20 and back part, not, I guess, not mentioning the 8-foot tall blue bird alien, are the places where you usually lose people. So the information that Dr. Salla has located about the different technologies that we're developing for reversing aging through pharmaceutical means, I think, goes to show that these things are slowly going to be let out to the public. And hopefully at some point we'll get some sort of gene therapy, telomere therapy that's going to help us have a better quality of life and an extended life as well.
Excellent.
First, I tip my hat to everyone wearing a jacket in Florida. So, first question. Several of you had in your presentations the octagon-shaped Hubble, whatever, made up of the remnants of spacecraft. First of all, what color are those, and are they still in active use? Real brief, please.
Yes, they are. The outside is a reflective white.
Okay, thank you.
It's used from expelled pieces of rocketry that was used to launch satellites.
My second question is, we can see the space station from the ground. Why can't we see these craft if they're in such large population?
You're going to be able to see, I guess, a little bit of a reflection from here and there from this space station, the one that I'm talking about that's 500 miles out. Can't remember how far the ISS is. It's like 300 miles, around 250. So you are going to see, I mean, even the ISS, they see these things all the time. And if it's a craft, they're told it's a concept craft, you didn't see it, and they go along with it.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Hi, 3 questions, 2 are related. One is, why would Trump push for releasing all of those suppressed patents? 2, would anybody tell him anything that was top secret? And 3.
Let's try not to get political.
Well, no, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, he can't keep a secret, so what does he know? I mean, why is he pushing for the suppressed patents? Would anybody tell him? And then my last question is, what does it mean to be a human?
Again, let's keep answers.
I would aver that, I haven't closely studied Trump's decision on that, but I would aver that it sounds to me, I suspect it's in the language of Watergate, it's a public limited hangout, because it's not widely known by the American people that there are secret math patents, not just technical patents, but literally mathematical formulae governing things like our communications infrastructure that certainly I don't think were subject to that or talked about in terms of that disclosure by Trump.
I would just jump in and say, in one very fascinating conversation I had with a former high-level man with CIA I've talked about, who's very deeply interested in the UFO issue. One time I asked him what everyone would love to ask: how much do presidents know? His answer to me was, some have known more than others. He said, you have to keep in mind, presidents come and go, and those of us, we're lifers. Some presidents, he said, are reliable, others are not, and so on and so on. So this was a few years ago. By the way, he said to me that Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and George Bush Sr. all knew. Bill Clinton, and not as much, and George W. Bush, to his knowledge, not as much, and that's when I was speaking with him. Relating to Trump, it has to be said, Trump, there are claims that Trump has been briefed on things. I don't know how to confirm those. But the main thing to keep in mind, when you say he can't keep a secret, you have to keep in mind that there is a war going on right now, of course, between the intelligence community and him. Chuck Schumer said to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! A number of months ago, he said, look, when you're having it out with the CIA, they can take you down 6 ways till Sunday. He was talking about the CIA and Trump. Why she didn't follow up with an actual journalistic question is beyond me, but she didn't. So the fact is that when you have leaks coming out from within the intelligence community, which is obviously happening, you can't blame it all on him. But a thing I've always wondered is if we have the disclosure moment, if President Trump were to do it, we're in an interesting position in our world. If Obama had made a disclosure a few years ago, people would have, accepted it, I think, maybe. Some people. If Trump does it, you could see a 2 a.m. tweet saying, everyone knows this is real, and the question is, would he be believed? That's the real question if Trump were to do a disclosure.
Maybe it's all by design. If we could move on, we were just down to minutes. Thank you so much.
Hi, next question, Bill. I tend to believe you because you're backed up by a lot of evidence that comes out by Michael Salla. One thing is Forrestal was supposedly jumped out of the 6-story building, which I think was untrue. But do you guys think that there is any relation between Forrestal and his protege, which was Kennedy, who went after World War II to check out all these installations that the Germans had? And do you think there's any correlation to the two of them actually ending in a short demise like what happened?
We have 2 minutes left, maybe 3.
Actually, you're correct, really. That situation was unbelievable. Forrestal was pushed out of that window. Forrestal only a few months earlier structured this whole thing with Admiral Ricabada to initiate some 24 Navy operatives to get in every place in Germany and all the occupied countries over there and find out what's going on. And I think the fact that they murdered him for doing this is it's tragic.
All right, thank you so much.
Really quick, gentlemen, thank you for your testimonies and coming forward. I'm the Arizona State Director for MUFON. I have an entire team of investigators behind me. These people are trained, they're objective in their thinking, they're open-minded. You guys come before us, no evidence, no artifacts to lay here on the table, no records, but yet I ask you, if you were in my shoes, how would you react if you were in my shoes?
I would begin by studying the law of evidence, in which witnesses are free to testify as to what they did and saw and have such testimony regarded as direct evidence. So I challenge the epistemology of what you just presented. You made an assertion that we haven't offered evidence. I've been offering evidence now for 13 years. There are hundreds and hundreds of facts, and I really have to commend Michael Salla for beginning the process of using FOIA, as he has in Bill Tompkins' case, to verify what I've said. So I think we have to be very cautious about how we define evidence in this realm.
With respect, I have to disagree with you, Andy. Evidence is, testimony is not just testimony. Testimony is not equal to evidence.
It is evidence.
No,
it's direct
well,
evidence.
Evidence is but it is not. It's not acceptable.
No, that's proof. That's another issue. You said evidence.
Testimony
Witnesses
simply
can
because
testify.
it is.
Richard, this is not true. You said it in your presentation yesterday. Witnesses are free. People go to jail for life every day in this country based on what others testified as to what they saw and what they did.
And some testimonies are true.
Considered as evidence.
And some testimonies are false.
No, and that can't be confused with the issue of proof, that you then impose a certain standard of proof when you've decided which evidence of what people saw and did you're going to admit into the body of evidence that you consider.
In all trials, testimony is accepted and rejected. And it is accepted because it is deemed truthful. It is rejected because it is deemed false. And that's, so not all testimony is equal.
Look, something that somebody says happened to them is no more or less probative. Something that a witness says they saw or did is no more or less probative than a document. If you hang your document on the written records of the deep state, we're going to continue to be constrained within the limits that the deep state has imposed on us regarding what they've chosen to declassify. So clearly, eyewitness testimony is evidence, and it deserves the standing of evidence. And it's
and as evidence, it needs to be examined and either accepted or rejected based on how valid it appears.
Okay, I do want to add that on Friday night, I actually did my presentation in terms of 12 key claims that Bill Tompkins had made, what I thought were very significant claims. And for each of those claims, I did present quite a number of documents, FOIA documents, National Archives documents. So for the gentleman who was just standing here, I mean, that is evidence. I mean, that is documentary evidence. They come from the National Archives. We applied to the National Archives, and I got 1,500 pages of documents on Admiral Border that actually substantiated what Bill Tompkins was saying. And prior to getting those documents, we didn't even know who Admiral Border was. because he had misspelt the name in the book. So we were trying to confirm that this such an admiral existed, and we found out that he did exist. You know, I showed a document actually comparing the National Archives signature of Admiral Boulder with a document from Bill Tompkins' exit pass, which showed that he was taking packets out of Naval Air Station San Diego with the Admiral's signature on it, which substantiates a key part of his testimony. And so I think that's the way research works. First you have the eyewitness coming forward making their claims, and then researchers like us look at the documents, look at the National Archives, do the Freedom of Information Act,
Let me just say,
and compare with others.
Excuse me, that Andrew Basiago has to exit and prepare for his next setup. So we're not kicking him out, by the way. But he's the next one online to present down the hall. And so we'll let him get on his way. It'll take him a few minutes to set up for his presentation, and so we'll kind of wrap up during that time frame. And this is really terrific. Did you have something to say?
Yeah. If you would just hold it for a minute.
All righty. I will.
No,
that's what we're trying to do.
I think this is important. I have a photograph, and let me explain how I got it. I'm in meetings with people on highly technical aspects of this subject. A young lady, when I started talking about different types of extraterrestrial vehicle, a young lady at the other end of the table, she says, "I have one." So after the meeting was over, I contacted her, and she said, "Yes, I do have a photograph." So 2 weeks later, at the next meeting, of course, I asked her to please bring this. Okay, this photograph was taken in Oceanside, California, right off of a cul-de-sac on Lake Boulevard, okay, which overlooks Carlsbad. In this photograph are 5 separate UFOs at 300 feet. This photograph, when we were in close-ups of this, I have to say, this vehicle came out of a massive vehicle that's parked out in the galaxy, okay? This vehicle comes down, 5 of them, and the shape of them has windows on top. We determined the windows were to get the difference between the ambient temperature out in space and temperature at 300 feet. So we have 4 windows. The sides are serrated on. It's not round, it's flat. Okay? Now, these photographs then, friends of mine at when I worked at Northrop, were in San Diego. So I take this photograph to them. They build a 6-foot wooden model of this photograph. They take it up to the old wind tunnel in Hawthorne. They put it in there. This turns out to be the best method to disperse 4 gases for any other shape of any extraterrestrial vehicle. This is a photograph of 5 reptilian vehicles, and I've even got it in my second book. I'm just saying this is not a made-up picture. This is real. These extraterrestrials are in our atmosphere as we're talking, whether it's day or night. Okay, they're really there.
And really, I think we all can agree that regardless of anyone's opinion, an opinion doesn't matter. What matters is what is really real.
Yes.
The evidence and what is really real. And the real thing is that there's so much more. I know we could talk to our panelists forever, but they will have DVDs of each presentation available so that a lot of the things that you weren't able to discuss today, that you'll be able to get in a DVD. It's out at the MUFON desk or order later. So that's the good news. Richard, it appeared you had something to say.
I'm trying to remember.
Oh, okay.
So I guess it wasn't that important.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Well, I think the key thing was to get Andrew out so that he could set up for his next presentation. That does take a few minutes technically. We might have time for one more quick question, maybe.
So I read your book, Bill. I love it. So my question, I guess it might be answered in the second one. You explained that these Nordic girlies lived 2,000 years. This is like post they lived the same for decades. And they come back and visit. My question. I mean, I love the story. I understand the level of documentation. So my question then, as someone who's interested, is: have any of the girls that you described come back to visit?
And this has to be quick.
I only met one of them about 10 years later in another meeting, and that was it. They did not come back.
All right, thank you very much. Have you all really enjoyed this? Give them a good hand. Oh, one question, yes. Come to the microphone. This, by the way, is Frank Jacob, the director-producer of Packing for Mars.
Thanks. My question is about the 20 and Back program. I guess to you, Corey, because as far as I know, there are 3 people that have basically made this claim: yourself, Randy Kramer, and Michael Ralph. Do you guys have you ever had contact, or have you ever considered comparing notes? Because it seems like that program can't be too diverse. It seems to be a standard being used. Or would you consider kind of getting together in the spirit of let's get to the bottom of this and compare notes?
Sure, I'd consider it, but to this point, I have not compared notes or gotten together with any of those 2 individuals.
And do you want to, or do you feel like you should?
I'm happy to work with anyone to be able to try to get this information out to the wider public, and in a way that they can digest would be
great. And how could one contact you to sort of start this dialogue, perhaps?
Sure. spherebeingalliance.com is my website,
okay.
And spherebeingalliance@gmail.com is a good way to get hold of me.
Okay, awesome.
I want to make one last comment, if I may. I want to emphasize that I've had some contrary things to say to some of the gentlemen on this panel here, but I don't necessarily disbelieve anything, nor do I believe. I think that beyond the little circumscribed fence that we're all placed within by our officially established truth, that there's probably a very significant infrastructure that's beyond this. So I would ask Corey or Andy, who's not here, or Bill, or anyone else who's had interaction with it, simply to do their best in making it easy for the rest of us to examine. When those of us who believe in UFOs are speaking to a skeptical world, it is incumbent on us to provide evidence, and that's what we do. That's what I've been doing for over 20 years, and many of you here have been doing it. In other words, we understand that when you're speaking to someone who doesn't know about this subject of UFOs in general, that we're expected to give evidence as to why we believe it. What can outsiders or non-believers grab onto to allow them to say, oh yes, I see your point. You make a very good case. And we take that as a given. And so the same principle applies to any of people who are self-described whistleblowers, who have evidence that they want to provide to the rest of us. It is incumbent on them to give us information that we can analyze, that we can examine and critique, because that's what it's all about. That's actually what a free society really is about. It's about all of us being able to provide our information and having other people allowed to critique our information. All right? And that's what makes us strong. It's only by doing that we actually can approach truth. So again, it's incumbent on whistleblowers, to identify who they are, what their background is, so that we can be satisfied with that. I've said this many times in the past, that there are people who are whistleblowers and we know exactly who they are. I think of William Binney as one such person. You can look him up. He's very, very easy to identify, his background and his credentials. And so that counts for every single whistleblower. We have to know who they are. We have to be able to identify them, place them where they were. And if we can't do that, that's a problem. And on top of that, the evidence that they provide ideally should be available for the rest of us independently to examine. I want to commend Michael, by the way, for doing some very good legwork on Bill Tompkins and in bringing out his background. That's still not the same as going from sketches to a craft to indicating that these were actually built, that's a whole other thing. But it's that kind of work we need to do. We need to do research to validate. And the whistleblowers, again, last time I'll say this, really need to be able to make it easy for the rest of us to examine and judge their claims.
Let me just say real quickly, if any of you want to, we're going to take just a minute here to finish wrapping this up. I know Michael has something to say, but if any of you want to go ahead and exit for the next presentation on Andrew Basiago, feel free to. So we're just going to try to wrap it up neatly here. But I will say, too, from a news person's background, those points are very, very valid. But I would add to keep it simple, because as in news, some things and subjects are so highly technical that it just goes over everyone's head if they're not totally into it. And so there was always a joke in the newsroom that you write on a third grade level. That's not to undermine the intelligence of the audience. It is to understand that people are multitaskers, a gazillion things, that not necessarily backgrounded in your specific issue. So if you really want to get your point across, keep it simple, and all of the factors that Richard added would really help in getting your message across and getting it received by people who are not necessarily as well informed and researched as you guys are.
I do want to point out the kind of political aspect of this. Prior to my becoming involved in exopolitics, I actually was involved in international peace and conflict resolution, taught courses on human rights, and actually was a field investigator for human rights. I went to East Timor, Kosovo, Sri Lanka, interviewed many eyewitnesses. I could not ask them for evidence. If they had evidence, they would have been arrested. If I carried evidence out of that country, I would have been arrested. So the reality is, when you're dealing with a deeply political phenomenon, sometimes it's very dangerous to ask witnesses or eyewitnesses for evidence. So we have to be mindful of that. We have to kind of factor all this in, because there is a national security dimension to this, and some witnesses or eyewitnesses, their lives are threatened if they actually possess evidence. So, and they will kind of go to some effort to just not associate themselves with any evidence, just for safety reasons.
And I agree with you. And so there's always that balancing act that we have to do.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming and for your excellent questions. Wish we had more time. Give them a big hand. They did an excellent job. Thank you so much.